Hi, Kushmeister here again. Time for the third and final installment in my oral summary series about the unfinished SWAT Kats episodes. But this won't be the last recording I do, as there's still two unused premises and an entire unused script to tackle, the latter of which will be the subject of my next recording. But for now, let's take a look at what was apparently intended to be Season 2's finale, The Doctors of Doom. Like its predecessor, Season 1's finale, Catastrophe, it features a villain team-up that doesn't last long, the main difference here being that the partnership falls apart a lot sooner. As a Dr. Viper fan, The Doctors of Doom was the unfinished episode I was looking forward to learning about the most, and I'm sorry to say it ended up being kind of a big letdown. In its defense, unlike Succubus and Turmoil 2, all we have of it currently is the premise written by Glenn Leopold, dated June 16th, 1994. We have assurances from those who worked on the show, Lance Falk in particular, that this episode did go on to have a final completed script and model sheets, storyboards, etc. But currently, this premise is all we have to go on, and that's what I'll be covering here. And I'm assuming that Robert Ridgely would have reprised his role as Dr. Street. You may have noticed that whereas I pretty much merely summarized Succubus, I both summarized and critiqued Turmoil 2. This is because although I didn't really have any major problems with Succubus, some aspects of Turmoil 2 didn't sit right with me. Like the whole issue about why the Mega Beam goes berserk and destroys Turmoil's cloud fortress after Razor severs her control of it, instead of something more sensible, like the control of the satellite simply reverting to Massa. I thought that was dumb. It really should have just come back under Massa's control. One thing I didn't focus on was the complete lack of Felina Farrell. After she had such a strong turn in Succubus, complete with T-Bone giving her a beeper similar to Callie's communicator, she was nowhere to be found in Turmoil 2, not even as a supporting character like in Cry Turmoil, or even a background character like in SWAT Kats Unplugged, where she has a blink and you'll miss it cameo flying her uncle's chopper while he's talking to Dr. Ohm. It seemed weird to leave her out so completely, and it would have been interesting if she'd accompanied Razor against her uncle's wishes, or perhaps even led a separate enforcer team to try and reach the fortress. Maybe she and her men could have even apprehended Turmoil's lieutenant and the rest, because, as it is, Turmoil's followers just sort of disappear from the script in the finale. But, once again, enough preamble. So, let's move on to summarizing and critiquing Dr. Viper's final episode and how Season 2 would have closed out. We open with the stupidest gang of escaped criminals ever. These dopes, numbering 4, have decided that they're going to evade capture by hiding from the enforcers in Megakat Swamp at night. Despite encountering a three-eyed snake, obviously the result of some diabolical mad science experiment, the crooks are apparently unaware of the legendary Dr. Viper, and they've chosen to escape right into his neighborhood. Dr. Viper's neighborhood would make for an interesting show. Seeing a light, they head toward it. It turns out to be coming from a window in Viper's big tree lair fortress last seen in The Giant Bacteria. Speaking of which, behind the scenes material such as the Tremblay's art book and background art for the giant bacteria reveal that this particular part of the swamp is rather ominously known as the Dead Forest. Rather than taking one look at that tree and running the other way, the crooks, using broken off branches as cudgels, decide to break into it. Yes, these geniuses look at that giant, scary looking tree thing and decide it's a good idea to rob its owner. Even if they are somehow unaware of the legendary Dr. Viper, does it look like the home of someone you want to rob? Plus, I might add, again, they're in a part of the swamp called the Dead Forest. Someone living in such a place doesn't seem like the kind of guy you want to mess with. These guys must have escaped from the Megakat prison for the criminally stupid. Well, surprise, surprise, it ends very badly for them. Upon somehow breaking in, it doesn't look too accessible except by that ladder. They still aren't clued into whose home they've broken into, even when they find everything a mad scientist needs laid out bubbling and churning on a big lab table. Seeing the form of someone sleeping on a cot, the crook's leader goes to wake him up. Why? And he is horrified when the sleeping figure he turns over turns out to be the cicadified Dr. Harley Street, with a wicked scar across his face, who promptly bites him. A second crook tries to whack Street with his branch cudgel and gets bitten as well. They both turn into bug-eyed cicada drones under Street's command. The other two crooks turn to flee, but run into Dr. Viper, who is coming to see what all the noise is, and he asks them, won't you be my neighbor? Okay, not really, but that would have been really funny. Viper, incidentally, is back to his old self, pre-Katalyst X63. Apparently, the blast of anti-mutagens that he took in the face in Mutation City returned him to normal, for a given definition of normal. He knocks one guy aside with his tail and then grabs the other guy as he and Street decide to monologue to this random burglar about just how they met. Well, hey, they gotta tell the story to someone. Cut to a flashback to the ending of The Cicada. We cicadas would have ruled the world if it wasn't for those meddling SWAT Kats, Street says in voiceover, and their puppy too. Is the very beginning of the episode really the best place for an extended flashback? Anyway, those meddling SWAT Kats launched Street out of the Megakat Tower penthouse window with an octopus missile. Surprisingly, he does not use his wings to fly to safety, as we all assumed that he would have, and he falls the entire 300 stories and smacks into the pavement. After prying the octopus missile loose from his face, resulting in the scars he now has, he finds a manhole and crawls into it, beaten and battered from the fall, ignored because of the final battle against the Queen going on above. Recuperating in the sewer, he of course ran into Dr. V, who of course proposed an alliance, and the two went back to Viper's swamp lair, and Viper helped him recover from his fall, and that's how I met your mother. I mean, how Street ended up becoming Viper's roomie. As Mac Mange would say, end of story, end of you. Not needing the final crook for exposition anymore, Street gives him and the other guy, who was knocked out when Viper smacked him aside, the old chompy chomp, and they end up just like their two buddies. Oh well, chalk up 4 Darwin Awards. oh wait, they're not dead, just turned half alien. But being unable to continue contributing to the cat gene pool anymore unless and until they're cured means they may as well have died. So they should get honorary Darwin Awards. Do those exist? Meanwhile, Chance and Jake are rollerblading around an obstacle course of some kind in the salvage yard, propelled forward by turbocharged rollerblades with jet thrust things built into the heels. I'll let that sink in. Not only is this one of the sillier ideas that Glenn Leopold's ever come up with, even if it pales in comparison to what Falk gave us in Blowout, I'm unsure if the rough, uneven terrain of the salvage yard is the best place for this. Like any skates, rollerblades are designed for flat, even surfaces like streets and sidewalks, not unpaved dirt. But the SWAT Kats wouldn't be the SWAT Kats if they didn't do pointlessly dangerous things for fun, now would they? So, they're rollerblading around the salvage yard obstacle course, and that's all there is to it. This sequence really doesn't surprise me, though, I guess, because like everything Chance and Jake do together, it's a competition. A race in this case. Describing the turbo rollerblades as radical, Chance enthuses that they've given him another way to beat Jake. Methinks Chance's, or perhaps Glenn Leopold's, memory isn't so good. Except for the centrifuge contest in The Passmaster Always Rings Twice, Jake has won, or come close to winning, most of the contests that he and Chance have held together. He won the pepper eating contest in The Wrath of Darkcat because he was a dirty, rotten cheater. He was outdistancing his opponent even before Chance fell in the water and started drowning in Mutation City, and won in the reflex room in The Origin of Dr. Viper because T-Bone quote-unquote killed Manx, getting an automatic game over. Although T-Bone demanded and got a rematch, we didn't see the results. So Chance's history and competition with Jake isn't too good. Although maybe he's just really riding the two centrifuge wins for all they're worth, which is a very Chance thing to do. Anyway, back to rollerblading SWAT Kats. The duo performs some, quote, extreme type stunts, and Jake takes the lead. See? Angered, Chance rather stupidly decides to push his skates to the limit by making them go faster and faster, using a handheld control device, in case you were wondering how our boys were controlling these things. This ends about the way that you'd expect, badly. But how it ends is rather cartoony, with Chance's skate-clad feet sinking into the earth, leaving long skid trenches, the wheels breaking off. Upon extracting his feet, he realizes that they're smoking because the rollerblade engines have overheated, so he plunges his feet into a big barrel of water, which is said to be for drinking. Don't these guys have a cooler or bottled water? What do they, ladle the water out? Skating over, Jake complains about Chance ruining their drinking water. Again, why are they drinking from a barrel, or is this just for cool downs between obstacle course runs? While Chance tells him they really need to reinforce the roller part of the rollerblades to withstand the jet's power so that the wheels won't break off. And with that crucial scene out of the water, no pun intended, we cut to Megakat Biochemical Labs. Here we find Emil on duty at the front desk. Yes, I went back and rewatched The Origin of Dr. Viper, and Zyme does in fact say Emil, although he pronounces it weird. And how is this old idiot still employed here? He should have been fired for basically letting Dr. Viper walk right in through the front door because he had his nose buried in a comic book. I thought the point of Emil in that episode was to show that, the omnipresent artillery cannons notwithstanding, Megakat Biochemical's security was really lax in the innocent pre-Dr. Viper days, but this doofus is still working there, and not just as a guard, but the one at the front desk. And he's reading comics again. Ugh. At least he's a little more active this time when inevitably his reading is interrupted as Dr. Street, accompanied by the 4 converted prisoners, enters. One mutant snake person, I guess, can go unnoticed, but half cat, half alien miscreants, that's something even Emil can't overlook. Although maybe it's because they're constantly making buzzing noises. Stealthy cicada are not. Emil tries to draw his laser pistol, but the former prisoners pin him against the wall mid-draw with their sticky yellow cocoon puke, which is the first indication that cicada converted from cats can do this. Previously, only quote-unquote normal cicada did it. Instead of converting him, the 5 just kind of leave him there and head upstairs to a top-secret room with a reinforced door, which they rip open, unknowingly triggering a silent alarm. Said alarm is detected by Felina Farrell, who is on her first mission with a new partner, Gray Taylor. He's a cocky rookie type who graduated top of his class at the Academy, and either has potentially interesting new character or expendable meat written all over him. Some backstory about how his grandfather used to fly a crop duster suggests the former, but it's too soon to tell. We do see that he's a bit of a reckless flyer. As they head toward the lab, he buzzes the Cat's Eye news chopper, which turns around and follows them because Angora, being Angora, sees an enforcer chopper heading somewhere in a hurry, and her story senses start tingling. Weirdly, although Johnny is of course described as riding in the chopper with her, there's no mention of Al, the guy supposedly doing all the flying. Instead, it's all the news chopper does this and the news chopper does that, as if the helicopter itself were a character. Felina doesn't want nosy Anne following them, but Taylor assures her he can lose them. Felina is described as being incredulous that, quote, this hot dog, what, got such high marks back at the Academy. I'm unsure if this means she likes him or not. Oh well. Back in the top secret room in Megakat Biochemical, Street searches among some beakers and finds one labeled Super-Katalyst 566, which is what they've come for. Somehow he grins, despite having a mouth that amounts to a pair of pincher-type mandibles, making it look like he's wearing a Groucho Marx mustache. Suddenly, Felina and Taylor burst in with laser pistols drawn and do their hold it right there routine. We're given no indication if they found and helped Emil. Having had no direct experience with Cicada, Felina is shocked and hesitates at Street's appearance, allowing 2 of the converted prisoners to get the drop on her and Taylor. Literally. They were clinging to the ceiling and leaped down. Leopold is unclear how far along in their transformation these guys are, but I do know that they don't have wings like Street does yet. Impressively, Felina and Taylor manage to flip the 2 prisoners off of themselves, but one's mandibles, okay, so that's how far along they are, tears Taylor's uniform sleeve. It's unclear if he was successfully bitten enough to convert him yet, so he's still hovering between new character and expendable sap at this point. Since he doesn't immediately turn into a bug-eyed drone, though, assuring Felina it's just a scratch, he might just be okay. Overeager, Taylor prepares to open fire on the Cicada, but Felina prevents him, telling him he could hit the highly explosive stores of chemicals and blow them all up. First, don't say that out loud and give Street ideas, and secondly, if you were worried about that, why did you come rushing in with gun drawn mere moments ago, huh, Lieutenant? And remember when she suddenly knew martial arts and drop kicked Laszlo in his gargoyle form into the water in Succubus? She shows some more such skills here as she karate chops one of the converted prisoners, knocking him aside. He goes flying and smacks face first into the big windows of the lab. Why are all the windows in this place floor to ceiling anyway? It's a one of the design elements of Megakat biochemical labs I've never really understood. He fails to smash through it, though. I'd say it's because the windows are made of armored glass, but the show has always been maddeningly inconsistent about how easy the Megakat biochemical windows are to break. Despite Zyme's claims, we've seen the bacteria monster's hands smash through after barely touching the glass, and a lightweight creepling and some ordinary cement slugs went flying through it surprisingly easily as well. So you'd think that this guy would too, but alas, he just comically smushes against it and slides down the glass. And the prisoner hitting the glass window allows us to transition to the exterior, where it turns out Taylor totally failed to lose the cat's eye news chopper. Al is a great pilot if he can successfully keep up with an enforcer chopper. Johnny films out the open side door. The live footage is shown on the TV in the garage, where Chance and Jake are working on repairing Chance's rollerblades, attaching new wheels. Upon seeing the cicada through the lab window on TV, they realize the bug infestation, as they call it, isn't over. Shouldn't they have already realized that? I mean, with Street having been unaccounted for at the end of the cicada? And I guess Chance really did conquer his bug phobia, because not only did he handle the scorpions in caverns of horror with nary a peep about his fears, but he isn't freaking out that the cicada are back. Kinda. There's no more natural ones, just converted cats. Except for the one that got launched in the rocket. We ultimately don't know what became of that one. Anyway, he and Jake suit up, hop into the Turbo Cat, and fly off to exterminate Street once and for all. Back at the lab, Felina uses a microscope to clobber one of the converted prisoners, who smacks her into a big shelf which collapses onto her and Taylor, pinning them. As the cicada approach, with Street giving his "soon you'll be one of us" type speeches, suddenly the SWAT Kats swing down outside the window, firing turbo blades, I'm sure Leopold meant mini turbo blades, through the glass to smash it. I can imagine poor Dr. Zyme, if he'd survived, going, "Practically indestructible, my left foot. I got gypped by that armored glass salesman." T-Bone finally gets a taste of what poor Razor experienced last time, as Street vomits cocoon puke all over him. And as he's about to get bitten, Razor karate kicks Street away with a "hi-ya," of course. If Street is still holding the beaker of Super-Katalyst 566 throughout all of this, I sure hope it's got a lid. Otherwise, that stuff is just sloshing all over the place. Using a claw, Razor slices his partner free of the cocoon sludge. T-Bone calls back to the last time he touched this stuff by remarking on how nasty it is and how much he hates it. After saving Felina and Taylor from being bitten too, the SWAT Kats pull the shelf off of the two enforcers, and what they do next is a little difficult to follow. It seems as though they heave the shelf at one of the converted prisoner cicada, who bites through it, and then just fire Glovatrix blasts at them instead. Do the Glovatrixes have built-in machine guns now? Taking a cue from his ally Dr. Viper, or because he overheard what Felina said earlier, Street grabs some beakers of highly explosive chemicals. helpfully labeled as such so that he, an astronomer and not a biochemist, can realize what their contents are and throws them. They do what highly explosive chemicals do best and highly explode. The blast knocks T-Bone and Razor into Felina and Taylor, and all four go crashing down. It turns out, no, Street has not been holding Super-Katalyst 566 this entire time. He just set it down at some point, and as far as I know, Leopold forgot to mention it. Now he grabs it and flies out the broken window with it. The SWAT Kats give chase using their Delta backpacks. Felina and Taylor chase off the remaining converted cats, and returning to the window, Felina helpfully yells at the departing SWAT Kats not to let Street escape. Thanks, Lieutenant. A few enforcer choppers show up. Who called them? Are they too reacting to the silent alarm? Street gums up their rotor blades using his puke and flies on unimpeded. They're described as veering off, their fates unknown as Leopold forgets to describe them crashing. Dr. Viper awaits his alien ally on the roof of a warehouse, and Street flies down, handing him the catalyst that he stole. Observing as they fly towards them, our heroes conclude the obvious, that Viper and Street are working together. They're always the last ones to know about villain team-ups. Let's capture these Doctors of Doom, Razor title drops as he and T-Bone launch mini spider missiles at the pair. But it turns out that although Viper may have been returned to his normal state, a few of the new abilities that Catalyst X-63 gave him remain, as he spews acid from underneath his fingernails again, melting the incoming missiles. Veering to avoid getting hit with the acid, the SWAT Kats are easy prey for Street, who takes them by surprise and does his puke thing. It turns out Delta backpacks are powered kinda jet engine things, and his cicada vomit clogs up their air intakes, causing the two vigilantes to drop out of the sky. Laughing, Viper and Street hastily exit stage left as our falling heroes hear the sound of approaching rotor blades. It's an enforcer chopper, and not just any enforcer chopper, but Felina and Taylor's. Launching grappling hooks from their Glovatrixes, they grab a hold of the passing helicopter and catch a free ride. Taylor is piloting, and Felina tells him to hold the controls steadily. Suddenly, though, he turns around in his seat, revealing insectoid compound eyes. He's been turned into a cicada drone. Wow, that nick the prisoner gave him must have been really minor for the effects of the transformation to take this long. Well, this puts Taylor firmly into the expendable meat category now, since, going by the cicada, once someone is bitten and turned into a bug-eyed drone, they're pretty much a gone goose, and no attempt is made to help or cure them. Unless, of course, this episode is going to address that issue. I mean, they wouldn't give us a new named enforcer character just to write him off, would they? Maybe this is like Chaos and Crystal, where you knew that they'd cure all the crystallized people once a character we're supposed to care about, like Manx, got turned to crystal and didn't shatter. Taylor, being Felina's supposedly likable new partner, should thus be the impetus for the heroes to find a cure for Street and the other cicadified cats. And wow, Taylor's already got bug mandibles. Glenn Leopold really did forget how long it took for a bitten cat to develop certain cicada features and abilities, didn't he? They're supposed to go through different stages. It took Street at least a day and a night to develop mandibles, but now Taylor's already got the chompy part so that he can attack Felina, leaving nobody flying the helicopter in the process, and potentially bite her. I guess his body is speeding the transformation up to make up for how long it took for the bite to start affecting him. Felina escapes from her transformed partner by jumping out the open side door of the out of control pilotless helicopter. What? Yeah, she's grabbed by T-Bone as she falls. He and Razor are still hanging onto the bottom. But wow, that was a dumb move there, Lieutenant. You could have thrown Taylor out instead, or karate chopped him unconscious, or, well, anything but basically leap to your potential death, hoping, I guess, that you'd be grabbed on the way down. Did she even know the SWAT Kats were hanging on down there? Leopold isn't clear whether them hanging on is why Felina told Taylor to fly steadily. If she didn't know they were down there before jumping, she's an idiot who just randomly chose death over being turned into a cicada, and if she did know that they were down there, then she's an idiot for hoping that she'd be caught as she fell. Either way, so far, this is the dumbest sequence. And did anyone free Emil, or is he still plastered to the wall back at the lab? Oh well. So after Felina leaped out of the Enforcer chopper and was caught by T-Bone, who, along with Razor, is dangling by the aircraft's undercarriage like Liam Neeson in Darkman, the converted Taylor leans out and uses his claws. He really is a lot further along in his transformation than he ought to be, to cut the cables holding the heroes and the Enforcer Lieutenant up. Now, why didn't Durant think of that in Darkman? Also, Taylor taking the time to poke out and slice the cables means the chopper still isn't being flown by anyone and is probably on its way to crashing violently into something. As they're falling, Razor suggests they use their max backpack thrusters to blow the cicada cocoon puke out of their intakes. This works, of course, saving the three from becoming street pizza. Meanwhile, Taylor has retaken control of the chopper before it crashed, and he circles around and shoots at them. Firing buzzsaw blades from their glovatrixes, they hit the rotor section, severing it from the rest of the chopper. Another Enforcer helicopter bites the big one, and it was doing so well up until now, and crash lands in the swamp? What? When did the chase suddenly make it out of the city and into Megakat Swamp? Only a few paragraphs ago, Street was handing the stolen goods over to Viper on top of a warehouse roof, and now suddenly the helicopter is nosediving into the swamp. I know this is just an outline, Glenn, but something like the chase proceeds out of the city towards the swamp would have been helpful. The SWAT Kats are running out of fuel for their Delta backpacks. After that short of a chase, I guess blowing out the cicada gunk used up a lot of fuel. But they and Felina, who T-Bone is still carrying, are saved by the arrival of the Cat's Eye news chopper who'd been following the pursuit. They're of course allowed aboard. Anne is full of questions, and our heroes are of course forthcoming with answers. What they don't do is attempt to have Al land in the swamp using the news chopper's pontoons so they can go see if Taylor survived the crash or not and either kill him or capture him. Anything but just go without checking. But this wouldn't be the last time they just assumed an enemy was toast and left without checking. That's not just something that the bad guys do in this show. Which means they really are writing Taylor off as a hopeless case, including Felina, who, knowing nothing about Cicada, really should be insisting they apprehend her converted partner and try to cure him. But nope, like everyone else bitten by a cicada, Taylor is just assumed to be beyond hope. I'd get mad at the waste of a potentially interesting character in Taylor, but Glenn Leopold has done this before, so it isn't surprising enough for me to get mad at, especially since Taylor being written off so casually still isn't the worst thing in this episode, which is about to outdo the giant bacteria for how cruelly and disturbingly Dr. Viper screws over his allies. If you thought what he did to Morbulus was bad, wow, wait till you see how he screws over Street and the other converted cat cicada. So we cut back to Viper's tree lair where he's using Super-Katalyst 566 to mix up some kind of, quote, nasty looking formula. Street and the other converted cats, including Taylor, who survived the crash and found his way here, I guess using the cicada hive mind, are waiting impatiently nearby. Well, Street is, anyway. Remember, he's the only one with any true autonomy, I guess. Anyway, Street believes that by stealing the catalyst, he has repaid his debt to Viper for helping him earlier, and wants to get on with the whole take over the world plot. But Viper drops a bombshell. It turns out that, big surprise, he hasn't been entirely honest with his ally. Instead of helping the cicada take over the world, he plans to use the catalyst they stole for him as part of his plan to destroy Megakat City and rebuild it as Viper City, his third name for his fantasy swamp city so far. Street is understandably confused and pissed, insisting the evil biochemist abide by their agreement. Why can't they do both? Street wants the world, Viper only wants the city. You'd think that they would find a workable compromise. Why doesn't he just bite this guy? Is Viper conversion proof? In fact, you'd think Street would have bitten Viper and turned him into a cat, snake, cicada drone under his command and used his biochemical expertise that way a long time ago. But Leopold never addresses why Street never did this. Out of simple gratitude for saving him? If so, Street is a far more honorable villain than Viper is, as we've seen before and are about to be gruesomely reminded of momentarily. Viper, tired of arguing with his fellow mad scientist about who is in charge, just throws some knockout gas into the midst of the assembled cicada, causing them to become woozy and start collapsing. With an eyedropper full of the stuff that he just got done mixing up, Viper is described as, quote, slinking towards the gradually blacking out Street in a scene that plays out almost like an impending date rape. Pro tip, as if we needed any more evidence, never ever trust Viper or ally oneself with him. And what vile thing does Street have planned now that he's betrayed his allies? What ghastly fate is in store for Dr. Street and company? I gotta say, this is where the episode loses me. Honestly, Street should have betrayed Viper, not the other way around. Street, armed with his bite capable of converting people into drones and backed by 5 flunkies, was really holding all the cards, and Viper's actual plan, which we'll learn in a bit, sounds more like something the cicada ought to be doing, and is in fact not only grotesquely at odds with Viper's plan to turn the city into a swamp, but would actually be self-defeating. After Viper's sudden but inevitable betrayal of his cicada companions, we cut back to the salvage yard, where Jake is finishing work on repairing Chance's rollerblades. No checking the crashed Enforcer chopper for Taylor. No searching the swamp where it landed for Viper's hideout. No checking back with the staff of Megakat Biochemical to find out just what it is that Street stole. No, it's back to the salvage yard to fix Chance's busted skates from earlier. Because priorities! Chance is zooming around on his newly repaired rollerblades as Jake aims a radar gun at him. With the reinforced wheels, the jet boosters built into the skates are allowing Chance to top out at 120 miles per hour without burning out and having the wheels pop off. But there's no end of problems to fix, as when Chance attempts to stop, it turns out the brakes aren't terribly responsive and he ends up crashing into the wall. He hits so hard he bounces off of it and flies backwards to land in the dirt. Presumably the jets on his skates have shut off too, otherwise once landing on his back, his legs would fly upward and he'd just keep flipping over and over across the salvage yard like a furry tumbleweed. Getting up, he realizes he's covered in ants. A teensy bit of his earlier bug phobia returns, but he manages to calmly brush them off, complaining, "Darn bugs." "Speaking of bugs," says Jake, with nary an "Are you okay?" after Chance's 120-mile-per-hour faceplant, "there's been no sign of Dr. Street since he and Viper disappeared weeks ago." "And this is what you guys have been doing since then? Fixing jet-powered rollerblades and not searching the swamp for Viper's hideout?" Jake's line about, quote, "those two slime balls possibly hatching something nasty" leads us to cut back to Viper's lair, where something nasty is indeed hatching, or about to anyway. Inside the lair are 6 cocoons. 5 are white, the 6th is black. As Viper walks in, they hatch open to reveal that Viper has used his Super-Katalyst 566 based formula to turn the 6 unfortunate cicada into giant mutant insects. Street is now a giant armored black scarab beetle, while Taylor and the 4 prisoners are, huge white grub worms. Boy, oh boy, did Dr. Street get royally screwed over. Bitten by an alien queen and turned into a half-cat, half-alien insect hybrid, and now Viper has mutated him and his pals even further into twisted mockeries of the insect kingdom. Street didn't deserve this. The episode treats him like a villain when he was always just an innocent astronomer who got bitten. And poor Taylor. And heck, I don't care what those 4 escaped prisoners did. They didn't deserve this. But then I guess neither did Morbulus. So I guess this just goes to show how much of a twisted sicko Viper is. I always felt like they toned down his sadism after his debut episode. He's downright comical at times in destructive nature. And if nothing else, Doctors of Doom is reminding us why he's such an utterly evil, dangerous wacko, and would have represented a return to form for him that was sorely lacking in his appearances post-giant bacteria. Addressing his 6 new creations, Viper explains that he's genetically altered them to obey his commands, as if to address earlier concerns about why his creations, particularly the bacteria monster made from a guy with every reason to want revenge, just like these 6, listen to him. Like Morbulus before them, Street, Taylor, and the other cicada have been transformed physically and mentally to such a point that their characters no longer exist as such. So I'm just going to call them the Scarab and the Grubworms. And now we get to Viper's evil scheme. According to him, the newly transformed bug monsters are perfect for digging, and he's going to have them tunnel their way into the Megakat thermonuclear plant. Since it's mentioned as residing by the bay, I'm pretty sure Leopold just means the regular nuclear power plant we've already seen several times before. There, they're going to break into the reactor, causing it to melt down and totally contaminate Megakat City, turning it into a nuclear wasteland. Later, Viper will explain that after the meltdown wipes out Megakat City, he can begin building his swamp city where the old city once stood, so he's basically copying Dark Cat's debut scheme. "I'll sue the pants off you, Viper." "Joke's on you, I don't wear pants." "You know what? Neither do I." No, seriously, I don't think Dark Cat wears pants under those robes of his. There are times where you can see bare upper thigh through the partition in the robes. Clearly, Leopold is going for some kind of Chernobyl-type scenario wherein Viper will repopulate the city with nuclear mutants, But this seems slightly out of character for a villain who's relied on purely biochemistry based evil schemes up to this point. And what about Viper himself? Surely Megakat Swamp and the Dead Forest are within the potential contamination zone. Is he immune to radiation just like he's apparently immune to cicada bites? If that's the case, then with the way he just so easily one-ups Street despite the latter holding all the cards, Viper comes off as a little Gary Stewish. I think I know who Glenn Leopold's favorite villain is. And now Viper is going for an evil plan that makes no sense even for him. This is what I meant when I said it would have made more sense for Street to betray Viper. Since cicada eat radioactive material, turning the entire city radioactive would mean an endless supply of food for them. But whatever. Point being, Viper is a double-crossing creep, and the cicada have all been turned into his mindlessly obedient slaves. They head off to carry out his idiotic, diabolical scheme. Cut to the subway. The armored grubworms dig out through the side of the tunnel in front of an oncoming train, and the motorman hits the brakes. Even though the train successfully stops without hurting them, the grubs still feel the need to spit acid at it, melting the windshield. The passengers all scream, but they still fare better than their predecessors in the giant bacteria, as, acid spit aside, the grubs are uninterested in the train and ignore it, continuing on down the tunnel. No word on whether the windshield melting acid hurt or killed the motorman, though. Up top, skyscrapers collapse into the ground due to the tunnels the grubs are digging underneath them, calling to mind Lance Falk's outline for Blackout, where an underground villain was using a gravity weapon to suck buildings, primarily power stations, down into the earth. As for any Enforcer involvement beyond Felina and Taylor's not terribly impressive performance back at Megakat Biochemical Labs, my friend a.k.a. will be furious to learn that their efforts to combat the giant bugs and prevent more buildings from being pulled underground amount to, quote, "the Enforcers are helpless." Without being told how they were alerted to the problem, Callie, the news, the SWAT Kats head underground in the Turbo Mole, which has been rebuilt after being chucked into the excavator and blown to bits in caverns of horror, and driving through the subway, follow the bug's slime trail. Ew. Will they get to the nuclear power plant in time to avert disaster? Somehow or another, the SWAT Kats figure out where the giant bugs are heading and get to the nuclear power plant just slightly ahead of them. I'd kind of hoped for a cameo from the "Stop! This is a secured area" guy here, but no dice. The grubworms spew acid at the Turbo Mole, forcing the SWAT Kats to bail. I guess this means the Turbo Mole is toast. Again. While the grubs are keeping our heroes busy, though, the giant scarab has broken into the reactor core. This is the third time this thing has been breached, and is gobbling up fuel rods. So that part of its cicada nature remains, at least. This is causing him to grow bigger and bigger, just like the cicada queen did when she binged on nuclear fuel rods. And Dr. Viper is there. Yeah, he just is. Even though he isn't described as accompanying the bugs or following them or even arriving at the power plant, he's just suddenly there. He assists his creations in battling the SWAT Kats to keep them away from the scarab. And I guess he really is immune to radiation if he's going to be on site when the meltdown happens, unless he has a really good quick escape plan. Like the scarab, The grub worms are armored and impervious to pretty much whatever the vigilantes throw at them. Turbo blades fail to penetrate their thick hides, and scrambler missiles fail to electrocute them. As Peter Venkman would say, the usual stuff isn't working. Meltdown is moments away. Glenn Leopold doesn't describe this, but I think it's because when the Scarab breached the reactor core, it smashed the water tank containing the fuel rods, and without the water to cool them, they're overheating faster than the huge bug can gobble them up. At least I think this is what is causing the problem. I'm not a nuclear physicist, but if this is the case, why didn't this cause a meltdown the last 2 times the reactor was breached? The creeplings took their sweet time packing the fuel rods into the carrying case, and the cicada queen didn't eat that many of the fuel rods before she started growing huge. By the logic I'm guessing Leopold is going with here, the whole place should have experienced meltdown in both those previous instances, meaning Megakat City should be glowing in the dark twice over. So why is it only a threat now? Because it needs to be. The end. Or is it because the Scarab is eating so much radioactive material and growing so huge it's going to blow up like Viper's spore pod in destructive nature? No, that isn't the case, I realize, as Razor says they need to cool the overheating fuel rods in the reactor. So he's got a plan to flood the whole building. Meanwhile, Dr. Viper, despite being so close to victory it doesn't matter if the vigilantes continue living for another 5 minutes or not, suddenly orders the giant Scarab to abandon eating its way through the reactor and go kill them. So it turns out that Razor's plan is to use himself and T-Bone as bug bait and goad the giant bugs into chasing them. So wait, if the SWAT Kats can goad these things into abandoning their mission and chasing them, the story doesn't need Viper to suddenly stupidly stop his plan to order the Scarab to kill them. That was going to happen anyway. If anything, he should be flapping his arms, enraged that his creations are disobeying him to pursue the SWAT Kats when they're so close to victory. Utilizing their turbo-powered rollerblades, the SWAT Kats get the bugs to chase them through the power plant. At first, I thought that Razor's plan was going to be to get them to chase them outside to the shore. In all of its appearances, yes, even the Wrath of Darkkat, the nuclear power plant is adjacent to Megakat Bay, so I thought that the SWAT Kats were going to get the bugs to unintentionally dig a channel from the building to the water, allowing the ocean to flow in and flood the reactor, cooling the overheating fuel rods down. Instead, they end up in one of the smokestack cooling tower things, where they zoom around the inside and trick the bugs into smashing a water valve. Screw the ocean, the power plant's own water supply is sufficient to flood the building and cool down those overheating rods. Overheating rods. But a new problem arises. The power plant has such an enormous water supply that breaking this one valve is filling up the cooling tower. With the water level rising, the SWAT Kats skate up the slightly inclined interior of the tower. Below them, the grub worms, who can't swim or climb very well, are trapped and drowning. Alas, poor Taylor. But the Scarab climbs up after the SWAT Kats, ahead of the rising water, biting at their heels, which should mean it's getting a face full of their rollerblades backblast, but whatever. Suddenly, Felina appears in a chopper and blasts a hole through the side of the tower, knocking the giant Scarab loose, and somehow avoiding doing the same to the SWAT Kats. The Scarab falls back down the cooling tower interior, with a generous helping of debris falling after it. This falling debris ensures that all of the mutant bugs, including the Scarab, are either crushed or sink and drown, ending their threat. bragging that, quote, unlike those stupid bugs, hey, you created him, genius. He can swim. Dr. Viper escapes into Megakat Bay through the smashed open valve. So that explains why there was so much water. The nuclear plant's cooling water supply comes directly from the ocean. So I was right about them using the waters of Megakat Bay, just wrong about how. It would have been nice if you'd established that this pipe led to the ocean earlier, Glenn. After the ordeal is over, T-Bone takes the opportunity to boast about how he won the imaginary race to the top of the cooling tower that he and Razor were having. Huh? Whatever. He uses scratches from the scarab's mandibles on the backs of Razor's skates as proof that Razor was behind. But it turns out that T-Bone has the same bite marks on his rollerblades too. As they depart, they pass Angora, who is reporting on the incident, and mumble about whether they can get an instant replay, which would be impossible unless Johnny was filming the chase up the side of the tower interior from the news chopper, which I'm not sure he did, as this bit with Anne reporting on the ground is the first indication that the media were ever even present on the scene. Again, as I said, this is just the premise Leopold used to convince the Hanna-Barbera people that Doctors of Doom would make a good episode. It's possible that some, or even all, of the various issues that I've covered here were ironed out in the final draft of the completed script, but until we get a hold of that, we'll never know. And all I can do is critique what is, after all, a very basic outline for a story, albeit one that leaves me pretty unsatisfied. If this was in fact intended as Season 2's finale, then as outlined here, it would have really paled in comparison to Catastrophe.